Welcome to Safety Chats. Host Jason Stark, Director of Safety at Baldwin Safety and Compliance, shares decades of aviation experience and a passion for safety. Let's get started with this week's Safety Chat.
So over 150 years ago, in the year 1883, there was a philologist. His name is Michel Brau, and he was the first person to use the word semantics. And I know we hear it in our language today. People will say, oh, that's just a matter of semantics. But semantics is important. And generally speaking, semantics is more or less the study of language and its meaning. But more specifically, and this is what I find interesting, more specifically, semantics can be used to describe how words have different meanings for different people because of their experiential or their emotional backgrounds or their emotional context. So in other words, a given word based on somebody's background can mean different things than what you and I may think it means. And you wonder why I'm bringing this up? And I'll get to it in a minute. Hey, everybody, my name's Jason. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Safety Chat podcast. It has been a while. Man, it's been a long time. I know we went on a little break there. Conference season started. We were at Commercial UAV. We were at VAI. We were at all different kinds of conferences. In fact, I can't remember where I was a week ago. And we got some more coming up. And obviously the big one, BASE, coming up. And I hope everybody comes out and visits us at BASE. I would love to see you. It's been busy. I've missed you guys. It's really good to be back. It's really good to be talking to you. And got some pretty good topics. And today's, I think, is actually important. The idea of semantics is very important, especially in aviation safety. And what really got me interested in it is my wife is in for a postgraduate certificate, and it's for a gifted special ed certificate. And they were talking about how semantics, and especially in light of how science is taught in the classroom and like what theory really means, what law really means, what hypothesis really means, got me thinking, because if the teaching is wrong, or if they don't pay attention to the semantics, the true meaning of the word, then students will be confused. They won't have the right understanding. They won't have the right worldview of what these words really mean. And I wonder the same in terms of our realm in aviation safety. And a couple come to mind, but the two biggest ones right now for me are hazards and risk. And I see those terms being used interchangeably, and they're not. They're not interchangeable. They're two separate, distinct things. And people come and say, well, it's a matter of semantics. Well, it is a matter of semantics, as a matter of fact, and it's the study of what the meaning is. And hazards and risks have two different meanings. It's really odd because when you look at a flight risk assessment, for example, one might argue that those points are risk, but really not. That's a whole nother podcast. But what the flight risk assessment is an inventory of hazards that you could face during your flight. And then a lot of times when people will have an incident or an accident, which is risk manifest, they say they're submitting a hazard report. So there's a little bit of, I don't know if I call it confusion, but maybe it's a rant. Maybe that's what I'll call this one. It's a rant. But I want to set the stage for this. Let's go back to the definition. First thing, the definition for a hazard, according to ICAO. The definition is any condition or object that has a potential to cause or contribute to an aircraft accident or incident. Now, risk is a little different. Risk is the potential consequence of that hazard expressed in terms of probability of that consequence happening and the severity of that consequence. So when we look at it in the purest sense, hazards are here and now. Hazards are all around us. We see them. They're any object or condition that can potentially cause or contribute to an aircraft accident or incident. So we see them on the ramp, we see them in flight, we see them in maintenance shops. It's any of those that you say, this is happening now, and this really could go badly. That's a hazard. So hazards are present. Hazards are around us. Risk, on the other hand, is a future state. Risk is the potential consequence of that hazard, or consequences of that hazard, expressed in terms of probability of that consequence occurring and the severity of said consequence. So let's take an example here. Let's say we have a 75-foot wide runway and a 25 knot direct crosswind. Pretty simple example. In fact, the crosswind is the one that ICAO uses in 9859. And we're landing a Challenger 600. I'm going back old school to the ones I used to fly. So we're landing a Challenger, or a medium to large business jet, on a 75-foot wide runway with a 25 knot direct crosswind. Now, that condition, one might say, has the potential to cause or contribute to an aircraft accident or incident. I think we would all agree that condition is present, it's now, this is what's happening. This is something that we can see in the present state. What could the consequence of that be? Well, they could have a runway excursion, they could overcorrect and scrape a wingtip, or they could land funny and damage the landing gear. All these potential consequences that you have of this condition. And what happens now is we look at the risk of those consequences manifesting. So let's say, for example, a runway excursion. Well, obviously it depends on the pilots, but you can look at that and say, okay, well, the potential or the probability of a runway excursion landing a jet in that condition across all different skill levels, across all different business aviation types, is probably about medium, low to medium. Okay, great. And so then what is the severity of it? Well, this is where it's good to get some people together and say, okay, realistically, if there was a runway excursion off the side because they didn't correct or whatever, what would be the damage? Well, you're looking at probably X number of dollars of damage, probably maybe minor injuries, but no fatalities. So you're looking at about medium risk as far as a risk assessment. So what we're saying there is that this hazard has the potential to manifest into a risk that would be categorized as medium high. So, but it hasn't happened yet. So that's risk. Risk has not happened. It's what we're saying could happen. But what we have presently is the hazard. The hazard is the condition that is setting the stage for a potential accident or incident. Now, when somebody will say the hazard of a runway excursion, that's not correct. The runway excursion itself isn't necessarily a hazard. That is the hazard consequence. That's how it manifested. Let's go back to hazard reports. It seems like everybody's system has it, but when you submit a report, they usually have a risk matrix. They're associated with the report, which is great, and no problem with that. But where it gets kind of muddy is if you're going to have your submitters truly do a risk assessment, they need to be trained on that, because we, as the safety managers, are trained on that, right? We're trained to do risk assessments, or we should be. But unless you're going to train to the level that you've been trained, your submitters, to do a risk assessment, I probably wouldn't have them do it. I would get the information and then risk assess it through the process that you have documented, through your process. If you own that process of risk assessment, it'd be through you and whoever you designated to risk assess and trained. So let's say somebody has a runway excursion and the aircraft goes off the end of the runway, shears the gear off, bends the flaps, basically scrapes up the whole bottom. Pretty extensive damage, right? And it's sitting there at the end of the runway. Nobody's hurt, thankfully, but you have pretty extensive damage to the aircraft. And somebody submits a report on that, and they get to the risk matrix and they try to risk assess it. And that's where I'm wondering, what exactly are we risk assessing? And if you have the answer, please let me know. Write in, let me know, because this is where I actually struggle. Because what you're seeing with that runway excursion in this case, or this outcome, you're seeing hazard consequence has manifested. It's there. So when it comes to the risk, there is no risk. The probability is 1. It's happened. It's there, and the severity is right in front of you. There is no forecasting this. It's right there. I know sometimes people say, well, how bad could have it gotten, or could have this manifested? And still, I scratch my head on that. I don't get it. It's there. So when you have an incident or accident or event, we should say, that's the risk manifest. It's there. When you're reporting something that is a condition or object to cause or contribute to an aircraft accident or incident, you truly then are reporting a hazard. So as safety managers, looking at what these words mean, as safety managers, especially when we're populating our hazard log, which should be central to your safety management system or hazard register, when you're populating this, we really need to ensure that we're first starting with truly what a hazard is. And the hazard being that condition or object that has the potential to cause or contribute to an aircraft incident. And then as an organization, you can say, okay, well, this hazard in the context of our operations with the people that we use and the equipment that we use, what are the potential consequences of this hazard in the context of our organization, and what is the probability and severity of these consequences? And you can do this exercise and populate your hazard register or hazard log. And that is, again, central to the safety management system. So getting back to Michel Breal and semantics is the study of language and its meaning, but it can describe how words have different meanings for different people. Well, in the safety space, we need to be pretty unified on this because we need to be speaking the same language. So when I say I have these hazards and talking to another safety professional or another regulator or whatever, it should be in their mind, okay, you have identified these conditions or objects which could potentially cause or contribute, which is awesome, which means you're being proactive. You're going out there and you're identifying these objects or these conditions that have the potential to cause or contribute to an accident or incident. So that's fantastic. And you're doing that by looking at what the consequences could be and providing risk assessments. So risk being a potential future state, a potential outcome of those hazards. And then everybody will be speaking the same language. So that's the rant. There are a few more terms that I do want to address at some point, one of them being goal versus objective. That one, especially when I'm teaching, that one seems to come up a lot about what's the difference between a goal and an objective. And that may be truly getting to just a matter of semantics, but that's something we'll tackle another time. And I really appreciate you tuning in, really appreciate you listening. Hope this was helpful. Talking about hazards, and when you start building your hazard register or your hazard log and you want to make sure only hazards get into it, start with that definition. This is truly what it is, and stick with that definition. ICAO went to great lengths to give us a good definition, and the FAA actually updated Part 5 to mirror the ICAO definition. And so we should start there to make sure that we are all on the same page. Again, thank you. Thank you for tuning in. If you happen to be at base here in about a month or so, come see me. I'll talk to you before then anyway. But come see me, come see the group. Love to see you, love to hear any feedback. Love to know if this is of any use to you, because I don't have an audience right here in front of me. I'm just hoping that I do have an audience afterwards. But let me know if this is any use or not, or what I can do to make it useful or valuable to you, because we truly do want to serve you. And as always, we thank you for what you do. It's not easy being safety managers, especially as our environment becomes more complex. So thank you for what you do. Love you guys, and I will talk to you soon. Till then, stay safe.
This podcast is brought to you by Baldwin Safety and Compliance, the leader in safety management for the transportation industry. Since 2004, Baldwin has been providing state-of-the-art solutions and 24/7 support to the aviation and transportation industries. Baldwin's clients include all sizes and types of transportation operators. Baldwin provides safety and related business services to commercial and non-commercial transportation operators, medical transporters, FBOs, MROs, airports, flight schools, UAS operators, firefighters, OEMs, ground transport operators, and others. Visit BaldwinSMS.com to discover how Baldwin can enhance your organization's safety program.